Hello, one and all, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to the Sports Station for the week of Tuesday, August 19th. I am Mark and Sarah. Dan Graham's back with us. Dan, how are you?
Yes, I'm so glad to be here. Fortunately, I missed out last week for certain reasons.
That's
won't
okay.
get into that, but I'm back this week, which is what matters.
Back and better than ever, as they say, we hope.
I hope so. I'm recharged.
Ambling in right now is Mike Eccles. Mike joining us once again. How are you doing today, Mike?
Hello. Oh, that's what an old man sounds like when he sits down in a chair and he's like, his body's all aching.
So we got a lot to talk about. A lot went on this week, guys. We had another slate of preseason football games. We had the Jets and the Giants. We had Johnny Manziel and Blake Bortles, a whole bunch of stuff. But at the same time, like we said last week, while National Football League is just starting up, Major League Baseball is gearing down towards the end of the season. We're getting these pennant races going right now. This is a development that we talked last week about how the Kansas City Royals had somehow, some way overtaken the Detroit Tigers in first place in the NL Central. In an equally stunning development, as of today, we're taping this podcast, as I mentioned, on the 19th. As of right now, the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim are a half game ahead of the Oakland Athletics in the American League West. Who in the world could have foreseen that?
How did this happen? Dan, how did this happen, Dan?
What, the Angels taking over?
Yeah, I mean, I was here last week, and you know, I know you listened to it. You actually helped edit it, even though you weren't here with us.
That's okay.
So you listened to it, and you know, I was talking. I did not know if there was anyone who could stop the Oakland A's right now. Sure enough, they get swept 3 straight by the Braves this past weekend. And the Angels are in first place.
Well,
yeah.
I had said on our radio show up at Centenary College, WNTI, that I thought the A's got the better end of the deal with getting their pitching better than the Tigers were. And both teams are starting to take a slump because Lester won his first 2 starts, and then that disastrous weekend in Atlanta just seemed to do everybody in. And looks like, and I watched the Sunday night game, I believe, where they were almost catching up. It was just like one long bomb after another. One guy had a multi-homer game. That first baseman that only comes in when lefties are pitching. What's the name of that prospect the A's have that plays first base?
You're not thinking of Stephen Vogt, are you? Is it the other guy?
No, whenever they have a lefty starting, he plays first base.
Nate Freeman.
He had 2 home runs, and they were both solo shots, and the Braves won 4-3 still.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's interesting. And you talk about just the Braves series. It wasn't just that. You look before that, they had just lost 3 out of 4 to those Kansas City Royals who we were just talking about. And meanwhile, the Angels have been playing fantastic baseball. They went into they lost 2 out of 3 from the Red Sox. Never mind. They swept the Phillies, and they took 2 out of 3 from the Braves.
What about their dominance?
And now they just took the first game of the series against Boston yesterday.
Good show prep
to
there,
put
Mark.
themselves.
But, however, I am looking forward to this weekend's series, the A's and Athletics, which caps off.
You mean the A's and the Angels?
What did I say now?
You said the A's and the Athletics.
Well, you two wake up here. I'm the old guy. I'm supposed to be making these mistakes.
The Angels and the Athletics.
Yeah, Angels and Athletics. There you go. Anaheim and Oakland.
But,
it is unfortunate we have to have Mike run the show.
This
is what happens.
This weekend's series I'm really looking forward to because this will determine better who should be leading the AL West.
Obviously, this will give us a good picture as to how these teams are right now, because obviously the A's are slumping, the Angels are starting to take over in that division. They're in first place. The main problem that Oakland's in right now, and this is something that Mike and I discussed last show, Mike, was we talked about how I was concerned about Oakland's bats, whether or not their hitting would be able to sustain itself, especially when they got to the postseason. And their lineup has started to falter here, and that's one of the main reasons they're out of first place.
I'm going to slightly disagree with you guys on your point, only because of this.
What?
Is that we're still in August.
Of course.
And of course, you know, as Dan was saying, and Mark, you were agreeing with him that this might be a real key weekend to see who's going to take over the division. Yet, as we sit here, I thought the same thing last week. Right after we went off the air, Mark, we signed off.
Yeah.
Big weekend for it took 3 of 4 from the Tigers. Yankees looked really strong. Then, boom, they get destroyed down in Baltimore. Can't hit the ball.
Yeah.
I'm thinking the Yankee season is done. Sure enough, as Tampa is now starting to rise again, the Yankees go down there, take 2 of 3, look really good. Pitching starts to come back. Corona looked great. And now all of a sudden, the Yankees in 1 week have went from being out of it to turning around again.
Well, hold on a second. There's no bigger Yankees fan than me. The Yankees are still out of it.
Why that?
I don't know.
They don't have the ability. They have a team that has enough talent to where they can put together a decent streak where they win some games like they're on now, whether within 3 games of the wild card. But their team isn't strong enough to where they can sustain that to get in the position where they're going to need to get to the postseason.
No, but this is my point: is that baseball has been so unpredictable this year. Last week, it looked like nobody could stop the Oakland A's. Mm-hmm. As we sit here now, they're out of first place. They might take 2 or 3 or even sweep the Angels and be right. I mean, it's so unpredictable the way the baseball season, which I think is great.
Of course.
I think it's great because there's more teams that are going to go down the September stretch in the race, especially with the extra wild card. That means people in the stands, ratings, people are watching baseball even in September, which I tell you what, as we've seen in the past, if there, is little interest in baseball, like if your team's not in it, you turn off completely.
Yeah.
And baseball attendance drops off tremendously in September because it's NFL season now.
Yeah.
Hockey starts in their preseason.
Basketball, same thing.
Yeah. And I think that we've got so many teams. I mean, look at the American League right now, Dan. We've got Seattle. We've got Kansas City. We've got Detroit. Tampa might jump back into this. Toronto is not technically out of it. So we've got a lot of teams still in this, Dan.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Dan.
No, please go ahead.
I'm Mark. You're Dan, right? Sorry, I forgot.
Mark,
what about
Dan.
it? Let's see. Well, looking at the standings now, it looks like the Yankees are a few games out because you said with that second wild card spot, the 3 teams that are ahead of the Yankees, and there's only 3, surprisingly. It's just Oakland for right now, Detroit for right now, and Seattle for right now. So you have all these second. Well, what can I say here? Well, Oakland and Seattle are in the AL West here. So
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Yankees are like the top AL East team in the wild card hunt.
Yeah.
But they're only separated by 3 games.
Yeah, and plus they also have to take into account the fact they have Toronto and Cleveland right behind them. Toronto's half a game behind the Yankees, and Cleveland's is a game and a half behind them. So these are. It's not like the Yankees have left all the other teams behind them in the dust. There are still a lot of teams that they're going to have to compete with, not just in front of them, but behind them to keep those teams from passing them.
And another example of that unpredictability. Last week, we saw Detroit looking like they were going to be out of it, and then their newest acquisition, Mark Price, throws a gem the other day. Mm-hmm. What a beautiful game he pitched the other day. Yeah.
Well, they've got, we said it before, they have all the tools, and it would be hard for me to imagine that they're not going to jump back in front of Kansas City by the time we get to the last few weeks of the season. Kansas City is obviously, their pitching staff has been fantastic as of late.
Yes.
James Shields has been leading that staff, and they've been outstanding. They went on a long streak. They won 6 in a row at one point. Then after a loss, they won 3 more. So they've won 9 out of 10. They just took 3 out of 4 from Minnesota. And they're on a hot streak right now. But again, you wonder how long they're going to be able to sustain that. And Detroit's a team that's not going to go away. They're not going to just fold up the tent and go home.
Well, let me ask you guys. We're going to still talk baseball, but I want to switch it around a little bit because I want to get both your opinions on this. Because this kind of happened. Maybe it was I had my eyes closed and I missed it. But I just checked the standings this morning, as you guys have the standings in front of you right now.
Yeah.
Is the Houston Astros in their division are not in last place.
No, you're exactly right.
But the Texas Rangers are.
Yeah, who would have seen that coming?
What happened to the Texas Rangers?
Injuries. A lot of injuries.
Is it a lot of? But isn't Adrian Beltre having this monster year this year?
Well, yeah, but you can remember A-Rod won the MVP on the Rangers one year when they finished in last place. That's as good evidence as there is that one player doesn't stop a whole team from going down the tubes. But yeah, they've dealt with a lot of injuries, Dan.
As far as Texas and Houston?
Well, just the Texas Rangers. What happened? Weren't they in the World Series a couple of times just a few years ago?
About 2 years ago, right?
Yeah,
I know. But you look at, let me read you off some of the names that are on their disabled list. Right now, Hugh Darvish just got placed on the DL, so that doesn't really count. But Prince Fielder has been gone for the year for a while.
I forgot Prince Fielder was there.
Yep, Matt Harrison, Derek Holland, Jurickson Profar, Alexi Ogando. You can also maybe throw Kevin Kuzmanoff's name in there. Mitch Moreland, who's been a first baseman for them for a while. There's a lot of guys that they're missing, and of course they had the deal that got rid of Ian Kinsler, and they don't have a lot of the guys that made them a great team back when. No Josh Hamilton. They don't have the guys that made them a great team back when they went to the World Series.
Yeah, but typically, can't you field a Double-A team and still finish ahead of the Houston Astros?
Not anymore. The Astros have some good players, Mike.
I guess just recently, I haven't been paying too much attention to the Astros.
Well, it makes sense.
I do say they're coming out with some wins, thanks to SportsCenter and that kind of thing. You see the highlights. Yeah. But still, you wouldn't expect the Texas Rangers, the way they've been so strong at the early part of this decade, to suddenly be a last-place team. And I believe, unless I'm wrong, guys, unless Minnesota's beating them out. I think Texas has the worst record in the American League.
They were right there
Yeah,
at the bottom. I'm not sure if they still have it now, but they
do.
They do?
They're the only American League team
Oh, yeah. They have
that
the
has
worst-
not reached 50 wins yet.
Yeah, they have the worst win percentage in baseball. It's them and Colorado are the two worst teams in their respective
Colorado.
leagues. Yeah. Well, think about that. You think about Beltray on Texas, Tulowitzki on Colorado. These are two great players slumming it with horrible teams, and this we can bring this around to Tulowitzki. Tulowitzki's a guy who people have been talking about trades with, whether or not he's going to be dealt. And I don't know, but I want to get your guys' take on this. I think Colorado would be insane to deal Tulowitzki. He's a huge fan draw. He came up with their team. He's been a Rocky his entire career. I think their attendance would go in the tubes. This fan base would take a long time before the fan base forgave them for that.
With Colorado and holding a franchise player like Tulowitzki, who's been very solid, great hitter and great infielder,
great everything.
This brings me back. I'm going through the sports spectrum here. I'm thinking back to if you were to gut out your team and start over, if you were the Colorado Rockies, if you wanted to go that route and do what the Cowboys did with Herschel Walker back in the day, about 25 years ago.
Interesting analogy.
If you could do that, if you could try to get Tulowitzki, a trade leverage with Tulowitzki and get draft picks and get some solid players
prospects.
and veterans.
They're like the baseball equivalent of draft picks.
Exactly. Now, if Colorado is good with that prospect, which Tulowitzki has been, a great product of their farm system,
right?
If I'm not mistaken.
No, yeah, absolutely.
So if they could do something like that, and let's say just bring in 4 or 5 Troy Tulowitzkis, so to speak, maybe they could get something going there. Maybe it's quantity more than quality at this point.
Four or 5 Troy Tulowitzkis might be a bridge too far, but I understand the point you're making. Yeah.
For those who may not know the Colorado Rockies that well, let's just say this. Any year, my wife and I can go to a Yankee game. And 2011, she got me tickets to go see Old Timers Day, and I was very happy. Not only because it's Old Timers Day, but because the Yankees were hosting the Rockies. And there were 2 players I wanted to see. It was Todd Helton. It was his last season.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Troy Tulowitzki. I wanted to see him in person play. I think he's one of the best all-around baseball players in Major League Baseball today. Now, that's going to be interesting, Dan, your idea there, if they can just use him to really build the franchise. I don't know if baseball or anybody will ever pull off that Herschel Walker thing again because the Vikings got burned so bad.
Yeah.
That while the Cowboys used every single draft pick for almost every one of those draft picks was a Pro Bowl player.
Hold on.
You gotta think
Let's just take a minute to appreciate the Cowboys for a second. All right, we can go.
But if there's a team out there, such as let's say the Yankees, or a team that's up there that has a bunch of polished players, if they have what the Vikings mindset was back in the day, thinking that Herschel Walker was that final piece, because I believe they had. Who did they have back in the day?
Well, I think the way they had a hodgepodge of quarterbacks, where they had Keith Millard and Chris Dolman on their defense. They had Joey Browner. They had a very good team that had made the playoffs for a few years.
So if they could try to sell Tulowitzki as the final piece to a team's championship puzzle, then maybe they can get something out of that.
Yeah, but baseball general managers are much more difficult to deal with when you're wanting to raid their farm system. Mm-hmm. They are really difficult.
And plus, I would say that Troy Tulowitzki, Herschel Walker was a good player, but Tulowitzki is a much better player than Herschel Walker was at that point.
But I've seen over the years, I've seen the Yankees, well, just one team in particular, the Yankees. The Yankees how many trades have they pulled off with teams to get star players in exchange for several of their prospects?
Honestly, in recent years, it's not as many as you would think.
Not as many, but they were pretty much raiding.
And I don't think they've
their
ever
own system to get these guys.
I think you could maybe compare the Clemens thing to it, although for Clemens they gave up David Wells.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
That's kind of the last time the Yankees have made a trade for a player who's up to Tulowitzki's caliber.
But the Yankees stopped doing that because in the 80s they kept coming up close, and it's because they would sign these free agents and give away the farm system. And I think the Yankees had enough of that.
No,
because what happened was once we hit the late 80s, early 90s, as the Yankees were a bottom dweller, teams that were winning with former Yankee prospects.
Yeah, I mean, you could compile a rotation in the 80s. You could look at Doug Drabeck, Al Leiter, Jim DeShays, Bob Tewksbury, and there's
Drabeck was the first one.
And there's one other name I'm forgetting. You could compile Jose Rijo. You can compile a rotation of former Yankee pitchers.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you remember that episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza's George Steinbrenner believes he's dead. He goes to
Yes,
George's
of
parents' house, and the first thing that comes out of George's dad's mouth,
Why
what did
did
you
you
trade
trade
Jay
Jay
Buhner for?
Actually, I didn't mind losing Jay Buhner.
Yeah.
I didn't mind losing Jay Buhner because I really don't think that Jay Buhner would have fit into those Yankee
Well,
championship teams.
here's
But
the question I want to ask you, Dan. Now, you're a Mets fan, and people are talking about, and the Mets
I'm
have...
a National Leaguer.
You're, okay. Well, thank you, Mike.
2006.
Well, here's,
2006,
I
could
mean,
say.
the
That was
Mets
happy
have
time.
a fantastic... Well, you're a Mets fan and a Red Sox fan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's look at... Now, both of these are teams with great farm systems.
Yes.
Right? Now,
Okay,
would
yeah.
you give up some... Like, if you were... Let's say for the Mets, would you give up... who's the pitcher? Montero? Rafael Montero?
Rafael Montero.
And Noah Syndergaard and one or two other guys in order to get Troy Tulowitzki?
Let's see. With the Mets' case, I think they have to rely more on pitching than they would with.
Would you
so
give
I
up-
wouldn't be keen on trading
Really?
pitchers.
Really?
Or maybe I said maybe a pitcher
Okay.
or two, because right now they're starting to get their relief, their bullpen stabilized, but with maybe with an ace or two, not an ace, but maybe one of the starting pitchers or something. Maybe they could work something out with a Tulowitzki deal. But
Well, do you think they'd be able to get Tulowitzki without having to give up like a guy like Syndergaard?
Syndergaard, I don't exactly know, but I don't think the Mets would really go that route though.
Really?
But now it's time for the Mets to do what is the unthinkable. And I think we saw an indication of that at yesterday's game.
Oh, right.
Yeah, where David Wright was booed after striking out by the Mets. Now, he has been the face of the franchise for years.
Well, hold on a second, though.
But they're not building around him. It's now time to get something for him.
Well, wait a
while
second,
he's
though.
still a viable player.
You can't trade him now when his stock is low.
No, it's
you're
not
gonna
that low.
get
That's just it.
anything.
It's not that low.
I disagree.
It's going to get lower. I don't think his stock's going to get any higher. And you got to trade him now while you can get. I thought
Right.
it was 3-4 years ago. I say build around him. He is the face of the franchise. He puts people into Citi Field. Now, get something while you can for him.
See, I disagree with that. I don't think that what you're going to get from him is going to be equal to his value. And I think he's still a guy who can be a contributor on a winning team. And I think the Mets would rather have that be in Flushing than in somewhere else.
You said you're a contributor to a winning team.
Yeah.
You're not going to have that in Flushing.
How do you know that? Based on what?
Based on it's the New York Mets. Come on.
Well, then
you're
why
a
would-
historian.
Okay, well, then why would you trade
You're a
him then if he's the guy who
historian. You
brings
know
people to the
this.
ballpark?
But you know
because
what?
he's not bringing as many people to the ballpark anymore.
Yeah, but how do you
and
know
when
you're
he
gonna
brings
trade
people
someone
in
who
and
will?
they boo him when he strikes out, it's time to get what you can for him.
Because I think what you were saying was in 2006, I think the Mets really peaked at what they could do around the league with, I think at the time it was Wilpon, and I'm trying to remember who was
Was it Mania?
Yeah,
Wasn't it
Omar
Manaea?
Yeah, it was
Minaya,
Omar
thank you very
Minaya,
much.
right.
And they went out 2005, 2006. They signed players
Oh, yeah.
to put that 2006 team together.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Pedro, Delgado,
Beltran, yeah.
Beltran. Thank you. I'm trying to think of a pitcher.
Paul LaDuca.
Billy Wagner.
Okay, yeah, Billy Wagner.
Yeah, you know, great closer. And they got all these people through free agency. And then when 2006 didn't work out, 2007 fell apart in
Yeah.
the last month of the season. All those free agents were gone.
Yeah.
And they just never found a way to work around it. And they were trying to do that free agent thing with bringing in Santana and K-Rod. And
Yeah.
these players never panned out. And I think, I'm kind of in the same ballpark as Mike here.
yeah.
With maybe trying to leverage a David Wright deal. See what you can get. Just put him out there and see what's the most that you can make out of it.
Okay. All right, well, that's fair. We should have a sound effect that every time me and Mike get into an argument, because it's an annual, it's a rite of passage on this show every single week. But hey, guys, we have next thing we want to talk about. We mentioned before all these preseason games.
As we get into NFL football, though, I
Yes.
do have to bring this up because I think this, you may not think so, I think it's a major story out of the NFL broke this morning. And the reason why I say that is that, as we've seen in the past, when you have teams in your division who are really, really good, you build, and then comes your time. I really felt until this morning that the Arizona Cardinals were going to make a real good run towards the Super Bowl. And then this morning...
And now you're saying that Darnold Dockett being gone for the season is going to get in the way of that?
I think that's a real blow to their defense because they've also got the linebacker who's also out for the year. And, offensively, Carson Palmer, even this preseason so far has been great. He looked really great last year, going 10-6, but not making the playoffs. And I think they have gotten better than last year. But I think the Dockett injury really hurts that defense.
I think that's a fair point because Dockett's a guy who's been there for a long time.
Yeah.
So I think that, and he's a leader on that defense. I do think that's something that will affect them, not both on and off the field, both in the locker room and on the
I'm trying
on
to
the
remember.
pitch.
Do the Cardinals run a 3-4 defense?
I don't remember.
4-3, I believe.
They do run a
4-3.
4-3? Okay.
Okay,
With the
because-
outside pass rush.
Right.
lanes.
But I was going to say, if they did run a 3-4, then they'd be screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With
Dockett is a super player. He's a great pass rusher. He's good against the run, and he's a key part of a defense that I think, in my opinion, we're ready. You know, I was thinking about this, Mark, on the way in because I know you remember this. It reminded me of the NFC East about 22 years ago, where the Giants win the Super Bowl in 90, the Redskins win in 91, the Cowboys win in 92, 93.
Yeah.
And you watched and I hate to talk about the Cowboys, but you watched the Cowboys as they made that trade with the Herschel Walker, and with the Vikings, and you watched them go from 7-9 to 11-5
to 13-3
to, of course, winning the Super Bowl because they had to get better to win against the best teams in the league, which were in their division. The Cardinals over the last 2 years, with Seattle and San Francisco up ahead of them, have now been building, and I think the Dockett injury really hurts their chances. Even though I still think Carson Palmer's sharp, he's still got, in my opinion, the best receiver in football in Larry Fitzgerald, but this is not going to be easy.
Okay. Well, that's fair. I think the Cardinals, you still have to remember, a lot of people forget they won 10 games last year, and they were the only team to beat Seattle in Seattle last year.
Yeah, this is a team that was ready to get through their division. And that's going to hurt. The Dockett injury is going to hurt.
But
okay.
I do want to say this, though, about what the NFL Network has done for the preseason. What the preseason has done in the last several years, nobody really cared about it. When I was growing up watching the Giants, preseason was nothing. It didn't really mean much. But now it has overtaken, by great measures, the Pro Bowl as must-watch football because you want to see the new players come in, see what they can contribute.
Yeah.
And the NFL Network and NFL.com have been supplying the best preseason football coverage I've seen since I first started watching football.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think this was interesting. I had this thought the other day, is the fact that in preseason, because for instance, there was a Broncos-Niners preseason game on the other day, which I didn't think was appointment viewing. Personally, I think it's interesting how in the preseason, the teams that were less successful last year, I think, are more intriguing than the good teams. Because the less intriguing teams, they're the ones with the highly touted rookies and the intriguing storylines, whereas the Niners and the Broncos, we'd like to see them play in the regular season because in the preseason you're not going to see a lot of Colin Kaepernick or Peyton Manning. But in the preseason, that's when you want to see the Jacksonville Jaguars play, or the Cleveland Browns, or the Minnesota Vikings.
You know, good thing you brought up the Jaguars because I am impressed with what the Jaguars have been doing in the last year or two.
Yeah, Gus Bradley's done a good job.
You know, Gus Bradley and that. I'm trying to remember the offensive coordinator's name. If someone could pull that up. I have it on my computer.
Talk amongst yourselves.
But so right now the controversy is Chad Henne or Blake Bortles, and right now Chad Henne's the clear-cut starter, and it's going to be one of those things. Henne's going to be the mentor to Blake Bortles, and Bortles will take over whenever the time is ready. But the offense has been a big improvement, and I'm going to pull up the guy's name now.
I don't think that should always be you know what? Bortles should be able to start the season. If he's looking better than Chad Henne at the end of the preseason or even in just workouts. It's always tough. I always like how they do that is when they say, oh, yeah, you know, he looked better than the other quarterback in preseason. Well, I tell you what, we had a guy in the fourth quarter for the Giants who looked a hell of a lot better than Eli Manning, but I'm not starting him over a two-time Super Bowl MVP because of who he was facing.
Are you referring to Curtis Painter? Or?
Yeah, I mean, who did he face in the fourth quarter? Was it the Colts' third or fourth string defense?
Yeah.
You know?
But what about that? 26-0?
Yeah.
Last 10
that was
minutes?
nuts. Jed Fish is the Jaguars' offensive coordinator.
Fish. I mean, but they're kind of bringing in sort of like a K-gun offense to Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I don't know what you would call it, the Henny gun offense or the B gun offense.
I don't know. They'll come up with a catchy name for it.
Their offense has been very impressive, and it didn't matter if it was Henny behind center or it was Bortles behind center. They were both doing a good job. And that guy Marquise Lee from USC that they got in the second round,
I was surprised.
He played a good job. And Justin Blackman being gone for God knows how long, Marquise Lee could fill in that void and step up, and the other receivers as well.
Yeah, it is. They need someone to stabilize that receiving course because it's been a mess. You mentioned Justin Blackman, Ace Sanders, the young receiver from South Carolina. He's suspended. That just devolved into just a complete joke, that Jacksonville receiving core. And now Marquise Lee, who you mentioned, played really well, had some nice catches, scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
They look like they could be a team that might be able to
get out of their abyss.
to play. Yeah, that's true. Might be able to play some teams tough this year, which would be an improvement from last year. Although we should say that they had a period of time last year, especially end of the season, where they played well. But yeah, they look like they're at a whole other level this season.
Dan, one of the things that Mark and I were talking about last week is the preseason, how the NFL Network brings us all the games several times a week.
And also NFL.com streams the games live.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, no, absolutely. And, we were talking about how you get to watch the local broadcast. So I'm watching the local broadcast of Jacksonville. And see, you would never know this unless you're watching the local broadcast. Because if they're on CBS, let's say Jacksonville's playing a regular season game against the Titans, you're not going to see this. They have done so much with Jacksonville Stadium.
Yeah.
They have, I think, a pool, a swimming pool, and they have other different amenities. They're trying to make it a better fan experience.
Well, who is that?
And I think Jacksonville is going to have a really nice season with a stronger fan base, because that's one thing that has really been bad for Jacksonville is nobody showing up for the games.
There are rumors that they were going to move the team, whatever. When Wayne Weaver sold the team, and he sold it to how do you pronounce his name? Shahid Khan?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And
I just trying to avoid
Khan,
names I can't
and,
pronounce.
Yeah, and Khan was keen on keeping them in Jacksonville.
Yeah,
and it was a very bold venture.
Well, kudos to them for doing a great job improving that stadium and trying to draw more fans, because everyone was saying just perform the quick fix and sign Tim Tebow. That'll get as many fans. That'll be more fans than you could imagine at that stadium.
The last couple seasons, a lot of their games were blacked out in the Jacksonville market because they weren't
so.
And they had seats covered up. Yeah. And they still couldn't sell the
they
games.
would pull down the big tarps on a lot of the upper deck seats.
Yeah, it was terrible.
It looks
terrible
like
time.
Jacksonville is going to turn around at least a little bit. And I think, Dan, I'm sorry, none of this mentoring stuff. If Blake Bortles is ready, you start him the first game.
I'm sorry. I see, this is my thing. What is the downside to sitting him down? To not starting in week one?
What's the downside? Winning games with a better quarterback.
What are you talking about? How do you know he's a better quarterback, though?
Because he's younger and he's better.
That is just because he's he's better because he's better. That's a foolproof argument.
Well, Chad Henne, is he going to play shortstop for me and bat third? No, he's going to be a quarterback. Chad Henne, to me, should have stayed in baseball.
If Henne's a good quarterback, he's a better quarterback than Bortles, I would sit Bortles down.
I don't think.
They were comparing Blake Bortles to Ben Roethlisberger. They both came out of small schools.
Mm-hmm.
Blake Bortles came out of UCF,
that, yeah.
So maybe they want to make sure that he could adjust to the big time pressure that the NFL can put on people. Because if you start in week one, and pretty soon he's going to start a primetime game, that's going to be a lot of attention. And then whatever he does that night, let's say he throws 3 touchdowns, but he ends up throwing the game winning pick 6. He has to deal with that the whole week.
Yeah.
So they want to make sure that he could get out of that UCF bubble, that little small school bubble, and adjust to the big world.
He has to deal with a touchdown interception he threw for that they lost. How much money is he getting paid? How much of a bonus did he get? Come on, Dan.
But
if you're at that level and you're getting paid that kind of money, you should be able to afford someone to take the pressure for you.
It's how he has developed as a player and a person, and making sure he has a strong character about him. Let's say at UCF he had a similar situation like that. They'd be like, "Oh, okay, it's okay. We'll make sure we'll talk to the media for you."
Yeah.
Because it's UCF.
They do coddle players a little more in college, certainly than
UCF
the NFL.
didn't give him a $25 million signing bonus.
But you know what? They're not going to give him that same kind of treatment. UCF did it because they knew how good he was. If they're saying the Jacksonville Jaguars will say, "Hey, we're paying you $25 million. You better start acting like you're $25 million."
Yeah,
exactly. There's nothing wrong with them saying that.
Right.
There's nothing wrong. You're in the first game. You are the future of this franchise. Start the first game. Throw touchdown passes. Win us games.
Right.
Yeah, but if he's not ready, well, then there's no point in throwing him in just to get his head kicked in, especially behind
do you
a
think
poor
he's not
offensive
ready
line.
Yet? I think he is.
I don't think he's ready. No.
See, and look at the franchises that have done this before.
Let's have
Andrew Luck.
Okay. Yeah, he's not Andrew Luck though.
No,
but he's close. I mean, wasn't he one of the first top draft choices this past year?
Well, so was Jamarcus Russell's one of the top draft choices his season coming out. Come on, that doesn't automatically
apples and oranges
mean you're ready.
That's apples and oranges there.
No, it's not.
Yeah, because I
didn't think first overall pick,
think that Russell. Yeah, but I didn't think that Russell was that good. An NFL
yes, but the
quarterback.
Raiders did. That's my point.
Well, that was the Raiders' fault.
Okay, but
the Raiders showed over the last 10 years their drafting has been horrible.
You can't tell me that any other team wouldn't have taken. Russell
who's that kid from Iowa? Gallery. They waited forever for him to develop.
Yeah.
The offensive tackle from Iowa, and he was one of the highest paid linemen in NFL history.
Yeah, well,
and he never
fair.
developed.
That's fair. But one thing I want to get to is we talked about this before. The Giants making that insane fourth quarter comeback the night in Indianapolis.
Third string power.
Yeah, I just want to talk about this because I had an interesting perspective on this game. I was watching the game on the NFL Network because I had been out while the game was on. I was watching the replay. And for some reason, the NFL Network puts the scores of the games on the bottom line, including the score of the game you're watching, which I think
that's the one
is
problem.
absurd. But anyway, I'm looking at the score, and it says, I catch it by accident, it says Giants 27, Colts 26, and I thought it interesting. I think that gave me an interesting perspective because you're watching this game and the Giants look horrible, look awful for 3 quarters, look terrible for 50 minutes of that game. And I'm looking at my dad and he's looking at me going, they won this game? Like we're laughing as the fourth quarter starts.
And something.
You never could have seen that coming.
This is week 3 of Eli Manning's struggles. And I don't want to, and I don't want to dismiss this as, this is not going to work. But he was 1 for 7 for 6 yards.
Yeah,
he has not had one decent showing so far.
No. It hasn't been pretty.
He's going to play 5 preseason games.
It hasn't been pretty, but I mean, I don't want to speak for you guys. Personally, I'm not very concerned. I don't put
I'm not
very much
concerned
stock
either.
in the preseason.
I am, and it's not with Eli's ability.
It's with Ben McAdoo?
No, it's with the offensive line.
Okay.
Really?
The one sack that Eli got against the Colts, he had time except Justin Pugh, who's supposed to be the future at the tackle position, got his butt kicked by the linebacker who made a move on him, left him completely. I mean, just Pugh looked so horrible on this play when this kid came in to make the sack for the Colts. That is what concerns me.
Well, see, it's not just the offense. I thought their defense didn't look very good either. Their defense got pushed around. Walter Thurman got beat a couple times. Tremaine McBride, the cornerback, got called for 2 penalties. The only guy who I thought looked good was Stevie Brown. I made a couple nice plays. But yeah, George, what you're talking about, DeQuell Jackson went right over Justin Pugh like he wasn't even there and nailed Eli.
Just a horrible. He put a move on Pugh, and it was like Pugh looked like not even a rookie.
Yeah,
he looked like a freshman at a Division III college.
Yeah. To one thing we were talking about before, though, good thing I like offensively was I thought their tight ends played better. Adrian Robinson, who was the guy we've been waiting for the entire preseason, had a couple nice catches there at the end. And Larry Donnell, I don't know why this guy's on this team. He blew 2 more blocks. I don't know why this guy's playing with the first team. He's terrible. He can't block anyone.
You know something? Kellen Davis had an impressive showing during that game. He had a jump ball for a touchdown.
He had a nice catch.
Maybe Kellen Davis should be number 2. I wouldn't say number 1, but I think Kellen Davis, after seeing that...
He's not a number 1 tight end because he's more of a blocker. He's not much of a pass catcher.
But it looks like he's very vertical in what he can do.
Yeah, he's got some ability for sure.
And what about the fan favorite, guys? 3 preseason games, 3 touchdown passes.
Corey Washington.
Yes.
Corey Washington.
Absolutely.
What a big-time
This is
contributor.
something I wanted to discuss real quick because we don't have too much time left in the show. The Giants receiving core. You look at the guys. They have guys who are going to make the team are probably Cruz, Jernigan, who am I missing?
Beckham.
Odell Beckham.
Beckham, yeah.
And there's a 4th. Who's the 4th guy who's going to make the team?
Well, it's not going to be
Randall.
It's not going to be
Randall, Cruz, Manningham.
No.
Randall,
Manningham will not make it.
No, he's not
Randall,
gonna make the team.
Cruz, Jernigan,
and Washington.
And no. Who am I talking? Randall, Cruz. Who are the guys that are going to make the team? Jernigan, and Beckham. Those are the 4 guys who make the team.
There'll be a 5th one. It'll be Washington.
I know, but you also have Washington. You have Marcus Harris. You have Mario Manningham. I think we all agree he's not going to make the team. How many receivers do the Giants keep?
Marcus Harris is going to be a rough cut when the time comes, but Corey Washington, what he's been showing so far, they'd be nuts not to take him.
I agree. I think it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they keep 6 receivers or if they try and
They've done it in
keep
the past.
Washington on the practice squad.
Yeah.
Harris on the practice squad, excuse me. But that'll be an interesting thing coming up. We'll talk about that part of that next week because we'll have the first round of cuts from the NFL to go over. The cut down day is coming up soon.
Was that after week 3 or week 4?
I think that's after week 3.
Okay.
We might have that to talk about next week, but we'll see.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, now it comes time for probably my favorite part of the show is Mike. I guess we could call this Mike Eccles time because we're going to dive into some Mike Eccles time here.
Thank you very much, Dan and Mark. And here we go, guys. I'm going to throw something at you guys. You haven't had time to prepare for it. Last week worked very well, so here we go with this week's. Gentlemen, the single worst officiating call in the history of sports. The one that you look like and you just like, I can't believe they did that.
Okay.
Now, hold on. Let me give you my first one. He's already hopping in his chair. I happened to rewatch this the other day on YouTube. Game 6 of the 1985 World Series.
I was thinking that.
The Royals and the Cardinals. How that was called safe, I will never, ever know. Go ahead, Dan. You were hopping ready to go.
Okay. I would have said that Monday Night Football game with the Packers and the Seahawks, but that was backup officiating because they had the lockout at the time.
Yeah, the film there.
So, they get a pass because they actually speeded up the talks between the officials union and the NFL. But I'm going to go on the record saying that game towards the end of the season, I believe it was 98 or 99, the Jets and Seahawks, where Vinny Testaverde was running in for a touchdown, and he was stopped clearly short of the goal line.
Yes.
A full yard from the goal line. And this is back when instant replay wasn't in. It was before that, but they took it out because it wasn't technically advanced yet as it is today. But it had to have been 98 or 99. I think it was 98 because Vinny Testaverde was still starting for the Jets. Stopped a yard clearly short. 1 yard fully short of the goal line.
And they called it
and
a
they gave it
touchdown.
to him.
I remember that.
And it was in the Meadowlands, and it cost the Seahawks the playoff spot, a potential playoff spot, and Dennis Erickson his job. And he went back to college football.
That's right. I do remember that call because, no, Vinny was not even close. Go ahead, Mark. Let's hear. What's the single worst officiating call in all of sports?
There are so many. This is such a there's I'm going to go way back. There's to talk about these, but there's one of the 1970 World Series where a player named Bernie Carper was coming to the plate on a little number in front of the plate. The umpire got in his way to judge the ball and then called him out when he didn't get tagged. There's a play in the 87 World Series no one talks about. Tommy Herr got picked off and was trying to get back to the base, and Ken Herback first got in his way, and then Herr got his foot into the bag before he got tagged, and the umpire didn't call interference and called him out. There's a Dankinger call. There is I'm trying to think of what was. There's the Ken Herback Ron Gant thing in the 91 World Series where Herback pulled Gant off the bag and tagged him, and the umpire called him out. There are so many of these.
I do want to give an honorable mention. I think it was the 77 World Series with the Yankees and Dodgers.
78, the Reggie Jackson thing?
Yeah, the Reggie Jackson rundown, and how he ended up I don't want to say he accidentally got in the way.
No,
he did. He accidentally stuck his hip out.
On purpose.
Yeah, but what made it even better was Tommy Lasorda's meltdown.
He was ranting. He was ranting.
That was fantastic. For me, I'm gonna be a giant homer on this. In the 1994 NFC Championship game, Cowboys and 49ers, there was a play. Cowboys were down, I think it was 10 points at the time. They had they threw a long ball to the end zone to Michael Irvin, who was one-on-one with Deion Sanders, and Sanders literally just ran into him, just barreled into Irvin, and no flags. No one threw a flag. Nothing happened.
Right. One more honorable mention, and then we'll call it a day. 2002 NFC wildcard game, Giants and 49ers. The
field goal.
That was horrible.
The long snapper. What was his name? Jorkin?
No, Trey Junkin.
Trey Junkin
missed, screwing it up, and then they're trying to improvise with the play. They throw it downfield. Whoever the intended receiver was clearly held. He was held by the collar.
Guy, Chike O'Keefe grabbed him and pulled him to the ground, and they thought he was an ineligible receiver when he wasn't.
He was the eligible one. He was the one that came to the referee. The referee puts on his mic and says, number 60,
he does the thing
I think it was 68,
69,
Rich Seibert is an eligible receiver. And they didn't get it.
You know what? And the next day they said we were wrong. Well, too late for that.
Yeah. Oh well. I'll never forget that game. But to be fair, the Giants lost that game long before that play occurred.
That was a bad
it was just a one bad thing after the next in the third quarter onwards.
I agree. So that does it for us here on the Sports Station. Thank you for tuning in for our 5th episode of this podcast. For Dan Graham and Mike Eccles. Thank you for tuning in.
You had to think twice about that?
Yes, I did. I wanted to make sure I got the name right.
Who have you been talking to?
For Dan Eccles and Mike Graham. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe on our YouTube page, and also check us out on Facebook. But we'll see you back here next week on The Sports Station.
Goodbye.